The clock on the hallway wall ticked like a heartbeat, but in this house, it felt more like a countdown. Eleanor stood by the kitchen window, her thin fingers gripping a damp cloth. She watched the golden sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. 70 years. That's how long she had been on this earth, and yet, standing in her son's $1 million mansion, she felt like she occupied no space at all. She was a ghost haunting a house that was built on her sacrifices. She began to wipe the marble countertop for the third time that hour. It was a nervous habit. If she stayed busy, she wouldn't have to think about the coldness in Mark's eyes. Mark, her only son. The boy she had worked 3 jobs to put through university. The boy whose scraped knees she had kissed and whose nightmares she had chased away with lullabies. Now, he was a man of importance, a man who looked at his mother not with love, but with a quiet, simmering irritation. The front door, heavy oak door, creaked open. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. It was Mark and Linda. She smoothed her faded apron and stepped toward the hallway, a small, hopeful smile on her face. "Welcome home," she whispered. "I've kept the dinner warm. It's the pot roast you used to love, Mark." Mark didn't even break his stride. He was unbuttoning his Italian suit jacket, tossing it onto the sofa. "Not now, Mom. We had a late lunch with the board members. We're full." Linda, trailing behind him, didn't even look at Eleanor. She stopped by the hallway mirror, adjusting her diamond earrings. "And Eleanor," Linda said, her voice sharp like a razor blade, "did you use that lemon-scented cleaner again? I told you, it gives me a headache. Use the organic one I bought. It's in the cupboard you can never seem to remember." "I'm sorry, Linda," Eleanor murmured, her head dropping. "I forgot. My memory isn't what it used to be." "Clearly," Linda snapped. She turned to Mark. "See? This is what I was talking about. She's becoming a liability. Last week the stove, this week the cleaner. What's next? Is she going to burn the house down while we're sleeping?" Mark sighed, a long, weary sound that hurt Eleanor more than any scream could. "She's just tired, Linda. Mom, go to your room. We have guests coming over for drinks later, and we need the kitchen clear." Eleanor opened her mouth to tell him that her chest had been feeling tight all day. She wanted to tell him that she felt dizzy when she stood up too fast. But the words died in her throat. Mark was already walking away, his phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something a business associate was saying. He hadn't asked her how her day was. He hadn't noticed that she was wearing the same dress she had worn for 3 days because she was too tired to do her own laundry. As Eleanor climbed the stairs to her small room at the end of the hall, she felt the weight of every year she had lived. She sat on the edge of her bed, the springs creaking under her frail frame. On her nightstand sat a framed photo of a younger Mark, holding a trophy from a middle school science fair. He was beaming, his arm wrapped around Eleanor's waist. In that photo, she was his world. She touched the glass of the frame, her eyes filling with tears. "Where did my boy go?" she whispered to the empty room. She didn't know then that downstairs, in the glow of the expensive chandelier, Mark and Linda were already signing the papers that would take away the only thing she had left. The betrayal had begun, and the silence of the house was about to become a scream she wouldn't be able to ignore. The night was unusually still, but Eleanor couldn't sleep. The tightness in her chest had returned, a dull ache that felt like a heavy stone sitting on her heart. She decided to go down to the kitchen for a glass of water, moving as quietly as a shadow so she wouldn't disturb Mark and Linda. But as she reached the bottom of the stairs, she saw a sliver of light spilling from Mark's study. She heard the clinking of ice in a glass and then Linda's voice, sharp and cold. "The developers called again, Mark. They're offering double for the Hamptons property. If we sell it by the end of the month, we can pay off the bridge loan and finally get that villa in Tuscany." Eleanor froze. The Hamptons property was her husband's last gift to her. It was a small, sheltered cottage where they had spent their happiest summers. Her husband's will had been clear, the cottage was hers for as long as she lived. "I know the price is good, Linda," Mark's voice sounded muffled, tired, but not protesting. "But the deed is in her name. She'll never agree to sell it. She thinks she's going to spend her final days there, looking at the ocean." "She doesn't have to agree in the way you think," Linda hissed. "She's 70, Mark. Half the time she can't find her glasses when they're on her head. Just tell her it's a document for her new heart medication coverage. Tell her it's a form from the government for her pension. She trusts you. She'll sign whatever you put in front of her without reading a single word." There was a long silence. Eleanor held her breath, praying, begging silently in her heart, for her son to defend her. "Say no, Mark. Please, just this once, choose me over the money," she thought. "Fine," Mark finally said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'll bring the papers to breakfast tomorrow. We'll tell her it's for her health insurance. Once she signs, we'll move her to that facility in the valley. It's cheaper, and it's far enough that we won't have to visit every weekend." Eleanor felt the world tilt. The son she had carried, the boy she had protected from every storm, was now the storm itself. He wasn't just taking her house, he was erasing her life. She didn't get her water. She turned back and crawled up the stairs, her legs feeling like lead. Back in her room, she didn't cry. Instead, a cold, hard clarity washed over her. She reached under her mattress and pulled out an old, leather-bound address book. She flipped to the letter Arthur, her husband's oldest friend and a retired estate lawyer. The next morning, Eleanor sat at the breakfast table, her face a mask of calm. Mark entered, looking groomed and professional, holding a manila envelope. "Morning, Mom," he said, not looking her in the eye. "I need you to sign some boring insurance papers. The policy is changing, and they need your signature to keep your coverage active." Eleanor looked at the pen he offered. She looked at his hand, the same hand she had held when he took his first steps. "Is it important, Mark?" she asked softly. "Very," he lied, sliding the paper toward her. "Just sign at the bottom, near the X dot." Eleanor took the pen. She didn't sign her name. Instead, she scribbled a small, unrecognizable mark. She knew Mark wouldn't check it closely in his rush to get to the office. As he snatched the paper back, a look of greed-filled relief crossed his face. "Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver," he said, kissing her forehead, a kiss that felt like the kiss of Judas. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, Eleanor grabbed her coat. She didn't call a taxi, she walked to the bus stop. She had an appointment with Arthur, and she had a secret of her own to reveal. Mark thought he was stealing a cottage, but he was about to find out that his mother had been holding the keys to a kingdom he never knew existed. The bus ride to Arthur's office felt like a journey through a past life. Eleanor looked at her reflection in the window, a tired, frail woman, but inside, a fire was beginning to burn. Arthur's office was tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, filled with the smell of old books and cigar smoke. When he saw Eleanor, his eyes softened with a mixture of pity and respect. "Eleanor," Arthur whispered, helping her into a chair. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have, Arthur," she replied, her voice steady. "I've seen the ghost of the son I used to know." She told him everything, the overhearing of the plan, the fake insurance papers, and the facility in the valley. Arthur's face grew dark with anger. He pulled out a thick, dusty file from his cabinet. "They think you are a helpless old woman, Eleanor," Arthur said, laying a document on the table. "They have forgotten who your father was. They have forgotten that you are the sole trustee of the Sterling estate. You see, Eleanor's father had been a silent partner in a massive shipping empire. When he passed, he didn't trust Mark's father with the bulk of the money, and he certainly didn't trust a young, unproven Mark. He left everything in a blind trust for Eleanor. Millions of dollars had been quietly growing in interest for decades. Eleanor had lived simply, keeping the secret because she wanted to be loved for her soul, not her bank balance. "I wanted to give it all to him on his 40th birthday, Eleanor said, a single tear finally escaping. "I wanted to see him set for life. But now I see that giving him this money would be like giving a bottle of wine to a man drowning in it. It would only feed his greed." "What do you want to do?" Arthur asked. "I want to give him exactly what he asked for," Eleanor said, a cold edge to her voice. "He wants the cottage? Let him have the walls. But the soul of this family stays with me. I want to rewrite my will, Arthur. Every penny, every stock, and the deed to the mansion itself, which, as you know, I secretly bought from the bank when Mark defaulted on his mortgage last year. I want it all moved." For the next 3 hours, they worked in silence. Eleanor signed papers that stripped Mark of his future inheritance. She moved the millions into a foundation for orphan children, the same kind of home she was born in before she was adopted. She kept only enough for a small apartment and her medical bills. When she returned home that evening, the house felt different. It no longer felt like her son's palace, it felt like a hollow shell of vanity. At dinner, Mark was unusually kind. He bought her a bouquet of cheap supermarket flowers. "Mom," Mark said, smiling that fake, corporate smile. "I've been thinking. You've been looking so tired lately. Linda and I found a beautiful resort in the valley. Lots of people your age, medical staff on site, 24/7. We think you'd be much happier there. We can move you in this weekend." Eleanor looked at the flowers, then at her son. She felt a profound sense of grief, not for herself, but for him. He was selling his mother for a yacht he didn't need. "If that's what you want, Mark," she said quietly, "I'll go. I'll start packing tonight." "That's my girl," Mark said, reaching for his wine. He didn't notice that Eleanor didn't touch her food. He didn't notice that she was looking at him with the same look a person gives a tragedy before turning away. The trap was set. Mark thought he had won a prize, but he was about to find out that by throwing his mother away, he had thrown away the keys to a kingdom he would never see. The morning of the move was gray and drizzly, as if the sky itself was mourning. Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, her suitcase, the same one she had used 30 years ago, packed with only the essentials. She didn't take the expensive jewelry Mark had gifted her over the years, she knew they were just bribes for her silence. She only took her husband's old watch, a few books, and the photo of Mark as a little boy. Downstairs, the house was a whirlwind of activity. Not out of sadness, but out of excitement. Linda was already walking through the rooms with an interior designer, pointing at Eleanor's furniture. "That old armchair has to go," Linda said, her voice echoing up the stairs. "It's an eyesore. We'll replace it with a modern velvet loop." Mark appeared at Eleanor's door. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting everywhere but her face. "You ready, Mom? The car is waiting. I've got a big meeting at noon, so we need to hurry." "I'm ready, Mark," Eleanor said softly. She stood up, her joints aching. As she walked past him, she stopped and placed a small, sealed envelope on his dresser. "This is for you. Don't open it until I'm gone. It's a list of things you'll need to know about the house." Mark chuckled, a dry, nervous sound. "Sure, Mom. Probably just about the leaky faucet in the basement. I'll check it later." The drive to the valley was silent. Mark stayed on his phone, barking orders at his secretary, while Eleanor watched the trees blur past. When they arrived at the facility, it wasn't a resort like Mark had promised. It was a cold, sterile building with peeling paint and the faint smell of bleach and sadness. The medical staff were overworked nurses who didn't even look up as they entered. "It's temporary, Mom," Mark said, sensing her hesitation. "Just until we get the renovations done at the house." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes searching for a shred of the boy who used to cry when she got a paper cut. She found nothing but greed and a hurry to leave. "You don't have to lie anymore, Mark," she said. "I know I'm not coming back." Mark's face hardened. "Let's not make a scene, Eleanor. You're being dramatic. I'll call you next week." He didn't hug her. He just patted her shoulder and walked away, his footsteps echoing fast as he hurried back to his luxury car. Eleanor stood in the lobby, a tiny figure in a large, uncaring room. She watched his car disappear around the bend. She felt a sharp pain in her chest, deeper than the physical one she had been hiding. But she had work to do. She walked to the payphone in the corner, she had left her cell phone behind on purpose, and dialed Arthur. "It's done, Arthur," she said, her voice trembling. "He's gone. You can send the notices now." Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Mark returned home with a whistle on his lips. He poured himself a glass of expensive scotch and remembered the envelope Eleanor had left. He picked it up, expecting a list of chores. But as he tore it open, his smile vanished. Inside was not a list of repairs. It was a legal notice of eviction. The letter was from Arthur's law firm. It stated that the mansion Mark was living in didn't belong to him. He had defaulted on the mortgage a year ago, and a private trust, the Sterling estate, had purchased the debt. The owner of that trust was Eleanor. And since she was no longer a resident of the house, the trust was exercising its right to sell the property immediately to fund an orphanage. Mark's glass shattered on the floor. At that moment, his phone rang. It was his bank. "Mr. Mark," the voice said. "We're calling about the Hamptons property. The signature on the deed transfer you submitted today, it was flagged as a forgery. And we have a letter from your mother's lawyer stating she has moved all her liquid assets. Your accounts are being frozen pending an investigation." The silence in the mansion was deafening. Mark looked around at the expensive paintings and the marble floors. In his rush to throw his mother away, he had accidentally triggered the trap she had set to save her soul. He had the house for now, but he had no money, no cottage, and no mother. And in that cold room in the valley, Eleanor sat by the window. She had lost her son, but she had regained her dignity. But as she looked at the rain, she felt her breath getting shorter. The sad ending she had sensed was coming for her, and she knew she wouldn't live to see Mark's downfall. The walls of the mansion felt like they were closing in on Mark. Within 48 hours, his world had turned into a graveyard of his own making. Linda had already packed her bags. The moment she realized the bank accounts were frozen and the Sterling estate held the deed to their home, her love vanished like smoke. She didn't even say goodbye. She just left Mark standing in the middle of an empty living room, surrounded by boxes of furniture that now belonged to a bank. Mark was desperate. He drove to the facility in the valley, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He didn't go there out of love. He went there because he thought he could still manipulate her. He thought if he cried, if he begged, if he played the role of the sorry son, she would sign the money back to him. He still didn't understand that some things, once broken, can never be mended with words. When he arrived at the nursing home, the air felt heavier than before. He ran to the front desk, his expensive shoes scuffing the linoleum floor. "Eleanor. I'm here to see Eleanor," he shouted. The nurse behind the desk looked up, her eyes tired and hollow. She didn't look at his expensive watch or his designer suit. She looked at him with a cold, piercing pity. "Are you the son?" she asked. "Yes, I'm Mark." "Where is she?" "I need to talk to her immediately." "It's a family emergency." "You're too late, Mr. Mark," the nurse said softly, placing a small plastic bag on the counter. "She passed away 2 hours ago." Her heart just gave out. She was very quiet. She didn't ask for anyone. Mark froze. The air left his lungs as if he had been punched. "Passed away?" "No, she was fine 3 days ago. She was just tired." "She was dying for months," the nurse replied, her voice gaining a sharp edge. "Her records show she had advanced heart failure. She must have been in immense pain while she was living with you. Didn't you notice?" Mark couldn't answer. He looked down at the plastic bag. Inside was her husband's old watch, the faded photo of Mark as a boy, and a small, handwritten note. With trembling fingers, he opened the paper. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't a map to hidden gold. It simply said, "I waited for you to look at me, Mark. Not as a burden, but as your mother. I kept the money a secret because I wanted to see if you would still love me when I had nothing left to give. I'm sorry I had to leave this way, but you cannot inherit a heart you've already broken. Sleep well, my boy. I've already forgiven you, but you will have to live with yourself." Mark fell to his knees in that sterile, bleach-smelling lobby. For the first time in 20 years, he cried. Not for the mansion, not for the yacht, and not for the millions. He cried because he realized that he had traded a diamond for a piece of glass. He had the money now, it was all gone to the orphanage, and he had no home. He was a middle-aged man with nothing but a plastic bag of memories and a heart full of shadows. He walked out into the rain, the same rain Eleanor had sat in on that park bench. He had no car, it had been repossessed an hour ago. He began to walk, clutching the photo of the little boy he used to be. The calm drama of his life had ended in a silent, deafening tragedy. He was finally free from his mother, just as he wanted. And that was his greatest punishment. Mark couldn't answer. He looked down at the plastic bag. Inside was her husband's old watch, the faded photo of Mark as a boy, and a small, handwritten note. With trembling fingers, he opened the paper. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't a map to hidden gold. It simply said, I waited for you to look at me, Mark. Not as a burden, but as your mother. I kept the money a secret because I wanted to see if you would still love me when I had nothing left to give. I'm sorry I had to leave this way, but you cannot inherit a heart you've already broken.